Diabetes is another chronic illness. Again, that's one of the fastest increasing chronic illnesses in our modern day. But the story we've been sold is that in large part is due to genetic factors or bad luck. However, in Australia a couple years ago they did a study. It was a small group. I think it was about 12 people who were type 2 diabetics. And these were people who had been like really, serious diabetes. Their pancreas hadn't produced insulin in over a year, insulin dependent and so forth. But type 2 is what they used to call adult onset. They don't call it that anymore because kids get it. But so they took these people and I'm trying to remember what they called it, intensive lifestyle alteration. So what they did is they did 3 things with them. They got them to start going on a walk every day, about 20 minutes. They had them start eating vegetables and fruit and not eating fried foods and refined carbohydrates. And they told them there was a chance they might get a little better, so they gave them hope. 6 months later, all 12 of the subjects, 100%, were completely cured just by changing those lifestyle factors. And the funny thing is that the head of the Diabetes Association in Australia must have panicked or something because they came out with a statement that said, these people aren't cured. Don't get it wrong. We haven't cured diabetes. These people are just in remission. So if they go back to eating an unhealthy lifestyle, diet, and not exercising, then the diabetes will come right back. But, to me that's like a laughable thought because it's like saying, I just fell down my stairs and broke my arm, right? You put a cast on it, my arm healed. But it didn't actually heal. My arm is actually in remission. Because if I fall down my stairs again and land the same way, it's going to break again. I mean, that's exactly what they're saying here with this diabetes study. It's remarkable, the stuff that's going on. Yes?
So their pancreas started secreting insulin?
Absolutely. 100% cured. Everything back to normal. And then finally, the agouti mice study, and that might be spelled wrong. There might be a D instead of a T. The agouti mice are this amazing research breed of mice. They have been studied for thousands and thousands of generations of mice because they reliably produce offspring that are discolored, so yellowish colored instead of brown. They reliably get cancer, obesity, and diabetes. Thousands of generations, so much so that generations of researchers have studied these mice because they are so reliable that they're the perfect test subject for studying genes because they keep producing offspring that are unhealthy and sick and die. So we figure, again, if we study their genes and figure out why and how that's happening, we can figure out how it's happening in the human. So these 2 researchers, and I don't remember their names, decided, you know what, let's try doing something completely different. Let's not look at their genes down a microscope anymore. Let's try changing their lifestyle, changing their diet. See what happens if we change their diet. These 2 researchers were ridiculed. They were called complete idiots for this idea, right? They're like, that's the most ridiculous thing. These mice, in the history of the thousands of generations and all the researchers that have studied agouti mice, have never cured them, never stopped the progression of the cancer and the obesity and so forth. And they thought, well, why would you change their diet? That's ridiculous. We've tried all these other interventions. Nothing's ever worked. You guys are idiots, right? So they went about it and did it anyway, changed their diet. And in one generation, the next generation of offspring, they changed the diet of one group of agouti mice. The next generation came out normal colored and didn't suffer from the cancer and the obesity. The first time ever. Never had they ever cured this. And all they did was change their diet, change the lifestyle factors a little bit. And these mice that were supposedly genetically programmed to have cancer and obesity and heart disease were completely cured. And then when I start reading these studies, aside from the laughable idea about the diabetes being in remission and so forth, I start to feel a little frustrated about it because why isn't this stuff on the cover of every journal? Why isn't this stuff the standard of care? And the answer to that question is another topic for another lecture. But think about it. Consider that. These things are happening all the time. Well, not all the time. The people who are brave enough or crazy enough to research these different ideas, how we can change the genetic expression of these humans and mice by changing lifestyle. So it's the lifestyle. And the 3 things that dictate our epigenetic expression are how we move, how we eat, and how we think and feel. Oh, you know, which reminds me of another study. Have you guys ever heard of Dean Ornish? Anybody heard of Dean Ornish? Anyone? No. Okay, so Dean Ornish is a researcher who, he's famous for two things. And one of them is he's the only researcher who's ever reliably or reproducibly reversed heart disease, atherosclerosis. It's hard to get that one out. And you know how he did it? He had people start exercising, going on every day, at least 30 minutes of exercise, start eating fruits and vegetables, and meditation. That's how he did it. And it was reliable to the point that he could do it over and over again and continue to reverse atherosclerosis in these people. And he was so incensed that this didn't immediately become the standard of care, you know, because nothing else was working. And this wasn't that long ago. This is, I think, 10 or 12, well, maybe 15 years ago. And the FDA really actually came to him and said, you know, we can't approve this therapy until you can show us that eating vegetables and meditating is not harmful. So this is the crazy reality of that. And the other thing he's famous for is using the same lifestyle intervention. He was actually curing men of prostate cancer and causing their genes that were expressing to cause the prostate cancer to turn off, just based on changing lifestyle to eating a healthy diet, exercising, and meditating. And by the way, that's actually the same gene expression that in women is the breast cancer gene. All right, so let's see which direction I want to go here. Well, let's take a closer look. And for an example, I believe I used hypertension or high blood pressure. And in getting ready for the class, I'm not a chemist. I studied biochemistry, but remembering how things work at the chemical level and the cellular level, it's not so much my focus. So I went online to look up hypertension and kind of, you know, bone up on some of the chemistry and that type of stuff. And I got really distracted because I went to webmd.com, you know, it's mainstream, whatever. And I started to look at what they said about hypertension, high blood pressure. You know, it's one of the biggest chronic illnesses. And I came across this, that the causes of hypertension, because I'm expecting it to say genetic, right? But the causes of hypertension from webmd.com are the amount of water and salt you have in your body, the condition of your kidneys, nervous system, or blood vessels, and your hormone levels. And that's literally what it said. It didn't say anything about your parents had it or your genes, or it actually doesn't even say anything about getting old, which I was surprised. And to me, I read all those and I think lifestyle or environment. Then I read this, and it says your doctor will measure your blood pressure many times before diagnosing you with high blood pressure. It is normal for your blood pressure to be different based on the time of day. And I started to think about a story of a patient I had about 2 years ago. And she came into the office, and you know, she started seeing me for, you know, variety of things, and we started working with her. And one day, she turned to me and said, you know, I really want to get off of my high blood pressure medication. And I said, oh, well, that's great. You know, I can probably help you, you know, make some changes that'll help you, you know, get to that point. How long have you been taking it? She said about a year, or about a year and a half at this point. And I said, okay, great. And do you still see the doctor who prescribed that to you? And she said, yeah, that's my primary physician. And I said, well, it'd probably be a good idea to talk to him about it too, because he's the one who prescribed it. You don't want to just stop taking it and not let him know that that's your goal. And she said, you know, I did. I talked to him a few months ago, and I told him I wanted to get off my blood pressure medication. And this is what he said to me. He said, well, we could probably do that, but what you need to do is lose 40 pounds. And I bet if you lose 40 pounds, you won't need the high blood pressure medication anymore. And I'm sitting there, you know, jaw dropped, right? Because this is a year after she was diagnosed with high blood pressure. The first moment her doctor ever mentioned to her, hey, if you lose 40 pounds, you might not have to take this medication. I mean, why isn't that the first question, right? And I read this, and it's like, your doctor will measure your blood pressure many times. So I'm thinking, okay, so she went in, she got her blood pressure measured many times, and was somehow diagnosed with high blood pressure, never told to lose 40 pounds at that point, just given a prescription. So I asked her, well, what happened? She said, well, what happened was a year and a half ago, I fell down the stairs and I twisted my knee, and I went to the emergency room. And when I was at the emergency room, they took my blood pressure, like they always do, and then all my charts went to my primary care physician, and he looked at them, and when I went in there a week later, and he said, oh, look, your blood pressure's high. Here's a prescription. And I thought, if you go to the emergency room and your blood pressure is not elevated, then there might be something wrong with you, right?